I'm Gaylene Preston, filmmaker of Mount Victoria. Why I say I'm a filmmaker is that I have spent the last 40 years making films that start between my ears. And so the limitations of my work rest here. Filmmaker, Mount Victoria, that's me. No television. Not until I was 16. Movies were what we did on a Saturday. We went to the 5 o'clock pictures. It was the thing our family could do together. My father had pretty much a 7-day-a-week job as a milkman, but he worked half a day on a Sunday. So that meant, because he had 2 jobs, so that meant we could go to the 5 o'clock pictures together as a family. But in those days, you know, we had 3 cinemas in Napier, and they all played the same film for 2 weeks, and we got the films from everywhere. So we saw great movies growing up. I think you have to know why you're doing it, because you are, whether it's a drama or a documentary, you're being very manipulative. The medium is built for joyful manipulation that you can make invisible. You know, the technology's there. And it's so great to have all that resource there to tell a compelling story, but the stronger the medium is, the larger the challenge to work out why you're telling it. As an independent filmmaker, with things on my mind that weren't necessarily stories, they'd be something that I thought was important, like youth unemployment. I thought that was important to make a documentary that showed how destructive that could be on an entire generation. I didn't have much choice. I had to be a producer to do the work, so I had to raise the money. So raising the money has always been part of what I've done, and I've always been careful to make sure I could raise the money from sources that were going to recognise my own creative integrity. So I haven't been making my films to please the investors. I've been absolutely blessed to have investors, private and public, who support my kaupapa. And I've never walked into any funding body with the project they wanted to do at the time. Never. I've always been walking around with a project where they're going, no, not that. So you have to be persuasive. So if you want to know what I thought about what it is I do, and I thought, well, am I a producer primarily, or am I a director primarily, or is it all just storytelling and all of that? And I thought, actually, what I am is I'm a persuader, because I have an idea and I have to persuade it out of my head and onto a page. I have to persuade it off this table and out into the world, and I have to persuade people to put some money in, and I have to persuade the audience to come. I think making a film is an act of compromise from beginning to end, because it's not going to feel exactly like that elusive kind of thing in your head that has stars around it, and it's beautiful and it's pure and it's the idea. And getting that to the screen it's fascinating and it's frustrating, and it's partly about taking something so ephemeral and putting it into reality. But I think the most important thing is you've got to hang on to the centre and know what you can compromise and what you must protect. You've got to protect your central idea. And that means you've got to know what it is, because it's not necessarily that clear. So a lot of compromise is going to be about, does it feel right? Does it feel wrong? Well, you do have to be compatible. And that's not, you have to enjoy the same things, I think. I don't mean, running. I mean enjoy the same films, enjoy reading the same stories, have a value system that's the same. And then after that, you can be really different. You can have totally different social lives, totally different approaches to life. But if you've got a value system, that'll keep you tight. I think the worst thing that can happen is you're busy making the film, you start to get script notes that aren't positive. I mean, this has happened to me all the time. So script notes not positive. You need to be working with other people who are going to stick with you in terms of how you might want to interpret those things. That doesn't mean you can't have a big argument. You can have a big argument, but if they start to leave the waka and build their own waka, then you're making a different film, or one of you is. You've got to be sure that you're making the same films. If you're making the same film, it's cool. So 1979, I had made a documentary that was the short for middle-aged spread. And that was shot by Waka Atwell. That was made by Waka and I. It was actually Waka's project. And I was wanting to do Learning Fast, and people kept saying, oh, you'd like working with Alan Bollinger. He's great cinematographer all round, but Albo's operating is muscular, it's thoughtful, and he listens. And a cinematographer, a camera operator has to be able to listen, especially in times, we made Mr. Wrong, no video assist. Your operator is the only person you've got. So you do a take and you say to the operator, did you get it? And during the take, if you're the director, you're watching the camera and you're watching the actor, and it's terribly intuitive. You're just working. Every part of you is working. And once the operator's off on a crane, or you don't know what they've seen, and they go one more, or they go, got it. So your whole film's sitting on that. Very important to have the person behind the camera sympathetic to the kaupapa. Absolutely the same. I have been called a kitchen table filmmaker in derogatory terms. I worked out early that my modus operandi was atelier rather than industrial. And by that I mean Gaylene Preston Productions just has to serve one careful lady owner, or sometimes not so careful, lady owner. And so this place, you're sitting in an artist's studio that sometimes makes a film, always has one on the go. The film, when I made Mr. Wrong, I wanted to make a mainstream piece of cinema that could be appreciated by the mainstream audience in New Zealand. And you can't really make niche. In those days, certainly not. You can't make niche feature films because no one's going to go. There's only kind of 23 niche people. Well, that's what I felt. And anyway, that isn't what I was trying to do. I was trying to communicate and consciousness raise on certain attitudes, and attitudes of men to women and women to men. That's been my bag, man. And I wanted to make an entertaining feature film that could have a central scene in it it wouldn't just be a thriller with someone screaming and wearing a diaphanous 90 and falling over just at the wrong time. This was going to be a film about a nice girl who was being terrorised and fearful in the middle of the day, and it had a comment about the hitchhikers, the women who there's still a lot of unsolved murders of women who set out on a journey and didn't get there. And right in the middle of that film is a self-defence course that actually tells anybody watching one thing you can do if you get yourself in a troublesome situation, which is don't think what he's going to do. Don't think about what he's going to do to you. Think about what you're going to do to him. And that sits in the middle of an otherwise genre-bending thriller. And that did have a broad audience. And I don't know whether it saved a single life. Who knows? But that's my kaupapa. So my films, I don't know if you'd say they're message films, but they're certainly about revealing strongly things that are against the commonly held mythology. I felt there was a bit of a sea change round about when Pete made the Lord of the Rings films, because his way of working is far more similar to mine, and somehow there was more of respect to be had for a director that wasn't going to turn up on set with a shot list. I have noticed that female firsts can actually have real trouble being respected sometimes. So when did I feel on a shoot that I got respect? Oh yeah, Perfect Strangers. Beautiful shoot, got full respect from everybody. It was such a pleasure. And that was a very personal film in that the story is a metaphorical story that's a total genre bender, bends everything every way. And I was down in Punakaiki and I was making it with the whānau, and it was lovely. Loved that shoot. Respect as a female filmmaker has emerged, I guess. I think the Me Too thing made a big difference, where suddenly there was a different look. I've always had respect from everybody I've worked with. But there's that extra there's that extra proactive enthusiasm that doesn't exist. So, generally speaking, in the industry, if I had made Mr. Wrong in 1984, Mr. Wrong's playing in New York and LA, it's making a bit of a splash, but it's had a trailer that has taken every screen in the film and done a Hitchcock would be proud thing, which means that the women's film festivals that wanted it all got turned down because they were seen as anti-commercial, and the regular film festivals, it wasn't a proper thriller. And the person who actually, in retrospect, really respected that film was Quentin Tarantino, who was working at Vestron Video during those days. So, you get to know those things. But I think had I turned up with exactly the same film and been a young, bright, talented director with something on their mind, I might have got a bit more attention in the industry. Having said that, I think I was lucky I didn't, because I scurried back home and made Ruby and Rata, and they said, I remember meeting this studio executive, and he said, you will go home and you will make your next film and you will come to Hollywood whether you like it or not. You will come. By the time I'd made Ruby and Rata, some of my peers had gone to Hollywood, and I noticed that they were basically spending a lot of time being hugely well paid to read hundreds of scripts and be in sort of development hell. And I couldn't see how that was going to work for me. And by then, my daughter was ready for school, kindy school. So here's where I belong, here's where I work, here's where I make the movies, here's the table where I get the first, get out the pencil, have the first thoughts. Well, actually, I tend to work in bed doing that. And down the road was the school. Down the road further exists the largest screen in the Southern Hemisphere. That way's the Film Commission, that way's New Zealand On Air. What's not to like, really? If you're me, it suits. Look, I still don't think I've got a career. I don't. There's plenty of people around here, women and men, younger than me, that have got stellar careers. Heaps of them. Some of them I've known since they were little, under this table. Every time I've thought I've had a career, everything's turned to shit. I don't really believe in careers. I have a particular philosophy about careers, because I think careers sort of, there's this ladder and you do this and you get that, and then you do this and you get that. There's a lot of snakes, and you can feel a failure because you missed some goal thing on your ladder to your great stellar career. And what are we after with a career? A career can mean you're just serving whoever you perceive to be up the ladder from you, and keeping ahead of those you perceive to be under the ladder from you. And it's never been, because I got into filmmaking by accident, and because the filmmaking grew from doing art and drama therapy in institutions in Britain, my reason for wanting to be a filmmaker is not that. I don't actually want to live in filmland. It's not a place I like. I can't believe everything anybody says in filmland, because everybody's schmoozing everybody to such an extent. I mean, I actually had a guy come up to me, a well-known producer, not Harvey Weinstein, who came up to me at Cannes and goes, "Oh, I love your movie. I haven't seen it, but I heard it was great." You go, how do you process that? I loved your movie. I haven't seen it. I heard it was great. So that's not my comfy place. I don't enjoy it. I made sure I worked with people who were better than me. And one of the first people I worked with who was better than me was Del King, editor. And Walker and I went up the mountain and we shot Bruce Burgess climbing Mount Ruapehu with Graham Dingle. Bruce Burgess with cerebral palsy. And we brought all this footage back and I had no idea what to do with it. And we sat in the cutting room and we tried this and that, and I was just despairing, and I went home to get under the duvet really, and a few days later Del rings up and she goes, "I've got your film for you." You go, "Oh, I hope she's right." And she was. She knew how to structure it. So you learn a lot from working with people who are better than you. The thing that I've loved about what I've been doing is getting better and better with the craft all the time. And I love taking particular parts of the craft and messing it up. I love the craft of filmmaking. The craft of filmmaking is just glorious. It's the most brilliant medium. I did start using non-actor actors anyway. So I made a film called Hold Up, little short film I made with Gibson Group that is about a deaf dress designer, a blind radio announcer, and a severely physically disabled film critic. So I've always been happy working with real people, non-actors. So working with actors was the challenge for me. And working on Mr. Wrong, I'd be inclined to do my best to tell the actors every little eye blink. Ruby and Rata, I actually storyboarded the whole film. Like there's 70 pages of graphic novel, which is Ruby and Rata. Most of the cast, the core cast of Ruby and Rata, the only actor there was Yvonne Lawley. So I don't know whether that was helpful or not. But once I did Bread and Roses and worked with Genevieve Pico, who's a very experienced Australian actor, because Heather Bolton was very good. All the actors I worked with were very good, but Genevieve had done thousands of episodes of The Sullivans, so her craft was quite outstanding, and I realised that I was better to go in, block the scene with the actors, then put a camera around it. So rather than planting an actor in a shot, actors lead. This was my breakthrough. I mean, in retrospect, it's how people do it, but I didn't know. And you block the scene, and I wanted Bread and Roses was for television and film. It had a cinema release as well as a television release in the same year, which was suffrage centennial year. So it was short, snappy scenes, television writing, made for cinema. So I had to make each scene one shot. So that's very demanding of you. And the camera had to be moving. So we would block the shot, block the move, choreograph actors to camera, and then shoot. Depends how you learn. I learn by doing it. So there would be no point in me shadowing anybody doing it, because I've got to do it my way. And my advice to anybody coming through wanting to direct is know your own business. Know what this industry is. It always amazes me that people have all sorts of opinions about the Film Commission. I say, who is the chair of the Film Commission? And they name the CEO. They don't know the systems they're in. There are systems everywhere. It's a creative industry. Idea industry. So know what you're dealing with. And I'd say there's only one way to make a film, and that's your way. And if anybody comes on board who wants to do it their way, listen very carefully. They might have something to offer. But in the end, there's only one way on my sets, and that's my way. Understand that your way is the way. And if people don't get it, male or female, then they need to move on so that someone else can come on board who does get it. And don't ask people to work for you for free. If someone's working for me for free, they're paying me to make my film. And I don't see any great heroism in standing there in front of your film at the film festival and go, I made this without the commission and everybody worked for free. And I don't see that as particularly cool, because that means you're running an amateur industry. For women, I think we have to work whole new ways around making films, because just as we're getting ready to have our babies is when we hit our stride. So don't muck about. If you want to be a filmmaker, you're either going to have to make your films after you've had your babies or before. I recommend before. So that doesn't mean practicing making endless short films. That means be a filmmaker. Don't emerge. Just go for it. And don't take no for an answer. Now, when I say don't take no for an answer, I mean when they say no, sometimes that's really just the first engagement. So that's the beginning of a long relationships, you see? And that's a start. That means somebody's taken you seriously enough to read the thing and diddle-a-da and get back to you and say no. Every meeting is its own competition. Know what's going on structurally in the funding bodies. Look for windows. Look for another way. I mean, look for mates will help you make it. Make sure you raise the money to pay at least minimum wage and go for it. You can shoot them on your phone. Do it now. Actually, I've got it written down in a book that are my visual diary of 1977. Do it now. I was up at Banff working with a Canadian group called Women in the Director's Chair. So it would take 8 mid-career Canadian directors who were well established in making documentary, and over 3 weeks up there in the mountains in the art centre, fast-track them to being confident drama directors. Part of that was bringing in experienced people who were working down in Vancouver. And one of them was an editor who had done a lot of 6 Feet Under. And one day she asked to see me. I was the mentor director. She was one of 2 mentor editors. She asked to see me, and I thought, something I'm doing is annoying her probably. So anyway, she came up to my rooms at the centre, and she seemed quite nervous. And we sat down, had a cup of tea, and she said, I want to ask you a really personal question. I thought, here we go. And she said, why aren't you bitter? And I said, how do you mean? And she said that all the directors she worked for, men and women, with the kind of experience that I had, were bitter. They were bitter practitioners, and I seemed not to be. And I thought, well, that's because I haven't been in an industrial setting and I haven't been bending what I'm doing into some studio thing. And I've had creative freedom. First cut, last say. There's the work. Minor changes, sure, but that's how I feel. First cut, last say. What you see is what I intended. So I think that's why I'm a relatively happy camper. I think I've always seen myself as part of my community, which isn't my film community. It's my extended family and it's my neighbours. So around here at the moment, my business manager lives next door because they bought the house off me. Pippa Sanderson, who I've known since she was 14, I've known the Sanderson family since Waimarama days. She lives 2 doors down. We've got a great community around here, and we have a roast once a month in somebody's house because we like talking to one another. So I had a place in Tākaka where I just really liked the conversations to be had in that community. And people would come, and I got to know a whole generation of people who came to stay in the woolshed, and now they're famous filmmakers. But we didn't sit around talking about film. They spent their entire time in the woolshed being silly kids. And I sat on the veranda talking about stuff. I'm the most proud of being able to make films over a long period of time and bring up a family and look after my elderly mother. After my father died, she came to live here. Bring up my daughter in the house, fold the work into the family. And if you look at the photographs that are there, the whakapapa in the hallway, you'll see great-great-grandmother, great-great-grandfather. Gradually the photos become films. And when I say I'm proud of it, I got away with it.